Hello and welcome to another bonus episode of the Runner's World podcast with me, Ben Hobson. Again, from my trip with Adidas, not sponsored. This episode features a conversation with head coach at the 2 Running Club in Kenya, the man behind the plan that is producing some of the fastest distance athletes in the world right now, including 2 times Boston Marathon winner Evans Chebet, Benson Kipruto, Amos Kipruto, and many, many more, Claudio Berardelli. I sat down with Claudio to discuss his approach to training, if there truly is a Kenyan method, and how being a coach is far more than just setting a training schedule each day. So please do enjoy this episode. Claudio, thank you for joining us.
Thank you too.
Everyone that we've spoken to so far has referenced you as the guiding force in kind of how they approach racing and their training and actually have faith in themselves in kind of being told what they can do. But before we get into that, can I just get a bit of info on you? How you've been in Kenya a long time. You've been working here with athletes for many a year. So just a bit of background on you, please.
Yeah, well, I have a degree in sports science. I graduated in Italy, Milan. And then during my studies, I got in touch with some people that at that time they were working with one of the leading management with East African. So, and I started working with them, first spending a bit of time in Italy with some athletes coming for races in Europe. Then January 2004 was my first time in Kenya. And I was not a runner myself. I was a cyclist up to a junior level. So I didn't know much about running, honestly speaking. Then when I arrived in Kenya in 2004, then I kind of realized that if I wanted to learn the job of coaching, I had probably to stay here. And I'm still here learning. I mean, almost after 20 years. And in the years, many things happened. And in 2016, I set up my own club, 2 Running Club, and supported by Adidas, and got married with a Kenyan. I have 2 kids here. So basically, I spend most of my adult life here, and here is home.
And this is home now.
Yeah.
And the club, let's talk about that, because this is Spencer from Adidas was here and he introduced me to the runners as I arrived, and you went through every single person here and all the races that they've won and their times, and it's an incredible bunch of athletes, especially if you look at the last year's results and who won what. How did this come together, and how is it for you to have this talent in one place all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm privileged because it's an amazing experience, and to have a group of athletes of such level, but also a group of friends. I don't know how to say, but we really go together. Anyway, in 2015, I was from a different professional experience, and at some point here in Kenya, but with another group. And then I was like thinking of having sabbatical year.
Yeah, like a year off or
something. Off to think a little bit about myself. But then some of the athletes that were with me, they were like, no way, you can't leave us behind, whatever you decide, but we are with you. And then I started thinking of creating a club and giving, an identity to a group. And then, of course, Adidas came in, and very happy for that. And I think what works here is that there is a strong sense of belonging to a project which goes beyond running. So we are here to work for a better future. Of course, running is what is the mean. I don't know how to say, So, and the club is called 2 Running Club, basically because 2 is the essence of togetherness, the individual for the group and the group for individual. And in a sense, is a provocation, because I thought that the idea of being a champion is much more than just to be a number 1. So, and based on this simple concept, we are trying to have our own philosophy on how we approach the job, how we stay together, how we face the challenges and try to overcome them. Yeah.
How do you approach the training of the natural talent that comes out of Iton and Kenya, and you look at the times of people who aren't even getting deals and they're running 58 minutes or something, and it's anyone over 60 is kind of probably going to get overlooked now. That the level of competition is so big in terms of talent and people driving to get a better life from running. How do you find it as a coach to sort of navigate that choice between someone who may have potential or someone who doesn't, and all those sorts of parts of life?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I think the most important thing with this level of talent is not to complicate things, and to make sure that you create the conditions to allow them to express what they have. So you see, I'm happy because despite having an academic background from Europe, but I grew up here as a coach. So the first generation of Kenyan athletes I work with, basically they coached me how to be a coach, and I grew up with the kind of a different approach, where of course you need to have the scientific background and whatever, but then you need to work on you have to create the conditions to allow them to express themselves, and not to fix them maybe into some fixed pattern, and my job is basically to help them that, okay, they are allowed to do mistakes because, of course, it's part of the job, but we have to kind of remain inside a certain boundaries, and then, of course, to learn how to avoid mistakes, because, the point here is not just to be good athletes. The point here now is to work on a career, because that's what even, for example, the market is asking now. I mean, they don't just want someone who wins London, but they want someone who wins London, then maybe comes back and gets another podium, then maybe he goes on to win again. So it's not easy, but, well, we are here to try.
Yeah, and then individualizing the training per athlete and how they respond to certain, but working as a group. It's kind of, that's the balance, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see, the concept of group training, it's very interesting because you have very unique dynamics, and if you know how to use them in respect of individuals, it can be an advantage. But of course, when I look at the group in training, I don't see a group. I see each individual in the group, and then that's why I decided back in the years that if I wanted to try to understand how to help these guys, I had to be here every single day, because it's when I'm there with them and then they know whom I am, so they know that little indication I give them from the car makes the difference, and together we try to understand every single workout, what we are doing, in respect of the group, yes, but in respect of each individual. And then, of course, you have people training early season, having competition early season, in the middle of the season, end of the season. So, of course, we have to differentiate with different strategies.
Do you think that the idea that there's a Kenyan method of training is actually not ultimately true? Because you talked about how you were educated by the athletes when you arrived here, but it's kind of almost become this notion that if you to run like a Kenyan or to train like the Kenyans do will bring results. Is that something that you would say is true, or is it actually just it's all runners just run and it's kind of...
I don't know. I don't think maybe we can talk about the Kenyan method, because I think that where Kenyan athletes have reached today in terms of training, it's high standard. So maybe a little bit less based on instinct like some years ago, and just by depending on their talent. So today you have professional groups, and in fact you can see the level of performance is very high. But I think more than a method, maybe there is an approach on how they look at what is running, and this idea that, for example, being here in our place, if someone doesn't tell you that this is a place where you have some of the best athletes in the world, you might wonder, this one can't be a camp for professional athletes, but it is, because they have this capacity to remain very humble, very connected to their background and those kind of things, and this is how it works for them. For them, running is just a way of living. I mean, most of these guys, they have families around here, but they know they have to stay here. This is their second home, and for them it's normal. For some European athletes, the profession of running, they tend to overthink, they tend to go in so much into kind of details that maybe are not the priorities.
Yeah, and they chop and change. There's quite a trend, I think, that people can follow one perhaps training principle, and if it's not immediately getting the results, then they might switch to sort of some other approach, or change coaches quite regularly. And I mean, that happens anyway, of course, but you don't get that so much here.
Yeah, again, probably here you don't have that kind of overthinking, and they are very fatalist.
Okay.
In a sense, if things happen,
so be it.
And they don't give themselves, at least mentally, boundaries. Like say, okay, who knows? Maybe one day I can be the next world record holder, and they believe so. Really,
Amos was talking about how he just says thank you to himself when he finishes a race. Like the sort of positive mental attitude of, even if after a bad race, he says like he fell and hurt his knee in. Which race was that?
Tokyo. Olympic.
At the Olympics, yeah. So he fell and he, ran for a bit, but he actually broke his knee a bit, and he was kind of like, "Oh God, this is the end. This is it." But still after that, he can come back and say, "No, good. I can fix this," and away I go again. Whereas I feel like that's, as you say, maybe more so than, or certainly part of the inherent talent here is more of the outlook on life as well as the aerobic capacity kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when we talk about the physiological characteristics, there's no doubt that they are talented. But I think that one of the main differences is also the intrinsic motivations. They know that whatever they achieve with running will have a huge impact on many generations to come. Because if you think that, I don't know, for example, Amos Kipruto, most likely with his activity, he has, fixed the life of the sister, the brother, the other sister, the brother, and then the children of the children of the children will kind of have a positive impact thanks to him. So I can imagine for how many generations, because they will go to better schools. So it's quite an interesting thing, no, and a huge responsibility for them, and they feel it.
Yeah,
they feel it.
I was going to, as the coach, you're probably the sort of the ear that gets. They'll talk to you not just about their running, but kind of almost the stresses. So you're kind of like the person that they talk. The pressure must be. I've asked all the guys that I've spoken to this week, and they've been very honest and said like, yeah, there is pressure there sometimes to be culturally, that it's absolutely part and parcel. Like you look after your family and you look after your community and you do that, but there's a lot more pressure kind of in a way that European athletes don't have that sort of additional knock-on effect, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly speaking, after many years doing this job, I think that the training program, the technical approach is probably having, of course, a percentage, but maybe the smaller percentage in the bigger scheme. How do you say? What I always tell my guys is we have to make sure that each of you gets a personal stability, which means financial stability a bit at different levels, and personal stability, families, whatever. Because you can have all the talent you want, but this profession is, in a sense, is very tough, because every day you have to find the reason why you're waking up so early, putting on the shoes, and if you have a lot of external factors that they are interfering, you can't make it. And so in that little office of mine, I mean, is where I go and listen to their family problems, financial problems, and being here with them, I know maybe on how someone sits in the morning having tea outside here, if maybe there is something wrong with him, because maybe he's sitting aside, and then I will. It's coaching. This is coaching. To me, it's a social science. If something like that exists, I don't know. But and then, of course, I mean, I do. I'm still in school for when it comes to methodology and all these things. It's extremely important, the scientific part. But these are individuals, and each of them has kind of story behind.
Everyone has their issues. Everyone has their problems that they have to deal with.
Yeah,
of course.
And this is also what makes this job very interesting, actually.
Yeah, of course. And perhaps the problems that the athletes have in Kenya are slightly bigger or different to athletes in a global scale. I mean, everyone has.
Yeah, I coach also some non-Kenyan athletes, some few. I had chance to have opportunities. In the the end, we are all humans with our weaknesses, and so not much difference.
Most of the guys here are either at marathon is their distance, or they're heading towards marathon as the distance. How do you progress that? Because marathon is obviously the distance that most runners are aiming towards for multiple reasons. What do you look for in a talent, and how do you manage that progression up distances through sort of 10K, half marathon?
When you get a new athlete, you have maybe a sort of introduction period where you have to understand whom you're dealing with, which kind of characteristics maybe this guy or this girl might have, and also in relation to his or her personality. And then, of course, we know that we don't have maybe a lot of time to develop a career. What I mean is that we also have to consider that there is a market which is asking us to perform good in a very short time. So, and then, you might have an athlete that in his mind wants to run track, like 5,000 or whatever, but then you discover that maybe in the side of his, anaerobic speed reserve, whatever, he doesn't have the final lap, which plays a huge role in track. So then you try to convince him or her to shift to a longer distance. And for marathon is also a mental issue. So you have to make sure that whoever decides to go into marathon is mentally ready, because it's completely a world by its own. But then for the shorter distances, you can mix up. What is happening now, for sure, especially with marathon, is no longer as before. Before, people were going into marathon when they were like 35 years of age. Now we are seeing that you can be a marathoner, and at the same time, in some periods of the year, maybe you can go back to your speed and to enjoy shorter distances. Why not? So you can play a little bit with this. I find personally, I don't know, but I would say the middle distance, the track, much more complicated to coach, because it needs a very precise fine-tuning. And of course, today the market, when it comes to marathon, is offering a lot of opportunities, more than the track. So you also have to consider all these aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the motivation behind the marathon a lot, is the prize fund is bigger. You get more, as you say, the market is asking for that more. And there's more sort of desire for that to be the distance.
And I think that is what somehow we know, developing an aerobic characteristic might have a bigger margin than maybe trying to improve the sprint capacity of an athlete. So Amos Kipruto could have never been a good 5,000 meter runner, even if maybe back in the years when he was a young boy, he was dreaming to be one of them, but he doesn't have what it takes to be. So, and then when they finally step into marathon, some athletes, they really discover like, wow,
this is me.
I'm enjoying. And there is margin of improvement, which actually takes some time. Think of Evans Chebet, 27 marathons, never out of top 4. And when I started working with him and he was a young boy, I didn't know. I had no idea that he could have been so good in marathon. So it takes time.
It takes time, yeah. That was great. That was really interesting just to hear how you guys work. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this bonus episode. Please listen to the others if you haven't already, because they are excellent. And remember to subscribe. More Kenya-based chit-chat coming soon alongside our regular podcast, and that comes out every Tuesday, but you know that already. Bye.